Welcome to Into the Woo, a wellness podcast hosted by Alice Hu. I'll be exploring the world of crystals, energy healing, spirit guides, and more to help you understand how they can unlock your potential. These concepts have helped me discover my purpose and my truth, and I can't wait to hear how they will inspire you. I'll show you how they can be accessible and powerful tools in your life. Discover your truth, speak your truth, step into your power. Human design has really allowed me to embrace my authentic self and to know that if I want to do something that serves my highest good that makes sense to me but doesn't make sense for other people, that it's okay for me to follow my intuition. With human design, one of the first things that I looked at, aside from which energy profile I was the authority. The authority is how you make decisions that best serve you. And I have a splenic authority, so it's directly connected with my intuition. Anytime I get that intuitive hit or ping, I should really follow it. It's helped me find more flow in my day-to-day life and really just to operate with ease, professionally and personally. If you haven't listened to the first episode of Human Design with Graciela Rasor, listen to that first because this is a deep dive into human design. So I want you to understand the basics first before listening to this episode that talks all about how to make decisions based on your authority.
The authority in human design. I'm so excited to talk to you guys about this because it's one of the things from human design that can actually make the biggest impact on living your design in your day-to-day life. I get the question all the time, especially at the end of a reading, okay, this is amazing. This is so much information. I feel so inspired. What's next? And I always advise my clients, come back to the authority that you just learned about. And that is the way that you'll start being able to practice living your design in daily life, because authority is your intuitive decision-making process that is unique to you and unique to your energy. And so when you're using your authority correctly, you'll find that you're just creating a lot more flow in your life and things feel a lot less sticky. And if you've heard me on other podcasts before, if you hear me on Instagram, you always hear me say, human design is all about getting your life in flow, making things feel easy. The things that you're doing should be things that you could do in your sleep. So we're all about inviting an ease, and that goes for every single energy type here. This is not just for the projectors. This is for everyone. Your life should feel good. Your life should feel somewhat easy. Obviously, we all face challenges, but day to day, you should be able to invite in a level of ease in your life that your authority will just help you to do. And so, as I said, it's all about intuitive decision making. Your authority is somewhat correlated to the energy centers that you have defined. There's basically a hierarchy of energy centers that you could have defined to lend yourself to have the authority that you do. They're also related to some of the energy types. If you've heard me before, you've heard me talk about the 5 energy types. So definitely go back and listen to that first episode if you haven't already. But we'll see that, say, MGs and generators, they're the only ones that could have a sacral authority, for example. And you'll hear me talk more about all the authorities. And projectors and manifestors, they're the only ones that could have, say, an egoic authority. But you just heard me there say projectors and manifestors could totally have the same authority, or generators and manifestors could totally have the same authority. So it's somewhat correlated to your type, but not 100% of the time. So don't get too caught up in your energy type when you're hearing me speak about these authorities. Really come back to just that intuitive decision making that we're speaking about. And so, without further ado, let's just jump into the authorities. So, the first authority that actually about 50% of people have. So, listen up because it's likely that you're operating in this way, is emotional authority. And what that means is that you have a defined solar plexus center. And it's something that really, really you want to bring into your life as a big decision maker for you. And so when you have that defined solar plexus center, you're someone who will really go through emotional waves in life. You might wake up, quote unquote, on the wrong side of the bed one day, or you might wake up feeling amazing. And there's kind of no rhyme or reason for it for you sometimes. So often people with emotional authority feel like they're the radio and God is the DJ upstairs. God, spirit, life force, whatever is the DJ upstairs, just kind of playing this particular emotional song for them. And everyone experiences a different kind of emotional wave if you have that defined solar plexus center. But ultimately, what it just means is that for you, there's less clarity in the now. And this is an example. Say you are feeling so excited. You just got off a great call at work. You're feeling, it's just a great day. You're feeling great. And your friend asks you to go to the movies. And you say, oh my gosh, yes, I would love to go to the movies. And then you get to Friday and you're thinking about going to the movies and you're like, why did I agree to this? I don't even want to see that movie. And I knew this would be a long week for me and I just want to sit at home with a glass of wine. That is your kind of emotional wave kicking in and just throwing you off track a little bit. And that's a very, very benign example. But you can see that because you were in this state of excitement, happiness, joy, you were at a very high peak in your emotional wave. And so you made a decision that corresponded with that peak that wasn't actually in tune with your intuitive clarity that would have come through if you were more at a place of cool, calm, and collected. And so with emotional authority, it's always getting back to that place of cool, calm, and collected before you make a big decision. Now, the movie example is not anything crazy. You know, if you ended up going to that movie, your life would not be changed. And conversely, if you canceled, I'm sure your friend would understand. However, it really comes into play when we start making those bigger decisions. So not accepting a job offer just because you're so excited in the moment about getting it, or not emailing someone back when you're in a low mood about something important just because you feel like you have to. A lot of what we're experiencing in culture teaches us that we have to be these immediate responders. And that's just not true. We really need to be giving ourselves more time to digest things and actually have the patience to kind of wait out our emotional waves before we can respond appropriately and respond from a place of integrity and clarity. And I want you to reframe this. This is not the universe punishing you by, making you this emotional person. First of all, it's a beautiful gift that you've been given, this gift of feeling the depths of emotions like you can. You're someone who is just letting emotions into your body, your soul's home, and kind of giving them a bed for the night and then embracing them and sending them on their way. And I want you to really think of emotion in that realm more so than, oh, I'm being punished, I can't make decisions immediately. No, this is actually the universe helping you out with timing. So going back to that email example, say you were in a low mood and you decided, okay, I will not send this email that I feel like I have to send because I just know that my energy is off right now. maybe the best time for that other person to receive that important email from you is the next day. And so it's actually, I want you to think of your emotional authority as helping you out with timing. This is a divine intervention in the form of timing and just tweaking things so that they work a little better for you. And I really, really want you to, if you have emotional authority, cultivate patience because it'll get you so, so far in the world. If you can just take that step back and own that you're just a person that takes a little bit more time to think things through and really take that on and celebrate it as a good thing.
So then what happens if someone's thinking, oh, if I'm supposed to make a decision when I'm more balanced, then what does it say about my emotions? If I'm really excited about something, can I not make a decision based on that peak emotional part of the wave?
I love that question. And so at the heart of it, you really want things to give you sweet emotion if you have emotional authority. So you do get to actually, if you're really excited about something and you notice that excitement kind of holding over, that's amazing. That's your sign. But what we don't want to do is feel really excited about something in the moment and then immediately respond to it and then sleep on it and say, oh, I wasn't actually that excited about that thing. Like I was just kind of caught up in the moment there.
Oh, I see. It's kind of like shiny object syndrome.
Yes. And our whole culture is really, really at risk of falling into shiny object syndrome. And what this 50% is being asked to realize is that there's so much more reward in just waiting something out and being patient.
Okay, so the key thing to remember is if you do get excited about something and maybe it's booking a trip somewhere, making a very big decision to see if you still feel the same like the next day, right?
100%. 24 hours usually is a good rule of thumb for you to wait something out.
Okay, this is very good advice for 50% of the population.
Yes. And honestly, couldn't we all be a little more patient sometimes? So I think there's a little bit of medicine in this one for all of us.
Yes, I completely agree. And so we have the emotional authority. And then what's the next one that's most popular if you're done with sharing about the emotional authority?
Yeah, absolutely. So the next authority that is a little more common is sacral. And you'll know if you have sacral authority if you're a generator or a manifesting generator. Now, you could have emotional authority if you're either of those types. All of the types could actually be emotional authority besides reflectors. But if you are a generator or a manifesting generator, these are the only types that can have sacral authority. And if you have listened to the first podcast, this will kind of ring true for you just based on what we talked about for generators and MGs. Because if you remember, generators and MGs are ruled by the sacral chakra. And the sacral chakra is all about desire, all about creation, all about getting what we want and feeling what we want and birthing things into the world, literally and figuratively. And when you really, really get down into it, that sacral is really caught up in just this feeling of, like you're eating something so good and it's so yummy and it's so delicious and filled with desire and just filling your body with warmth. That is the feeling that generators and MGs are ultimately ruled by. And so this comes into decision making. If you have that sacral as your authority, it just means that you're choosing what feels good to you in every single moment. You're being given the opportunity to see something, say, I'm excited by that. I like that. I feel expanded. I want it. And you get to have it. And you get to pick what feels good. Now, this I would say is kind of the simplest authority to work with, and yet we have a lot of conditioning around actually living in this way. So I want you to think back, if you have sacral authority, I want you to think back on a day where you literally just chose what felt good in every single moment. I'm talking about what you ate for breakfast, what workout you did, how you structured your work that day, what you did after work. Is there a day that you can truly think of where you just chose to do things that felt good in your system and in your body? And I'll bet you that those days are kind of few and far between, because it's not how we've been taught to operate. We've been taught that things need to be hard, that success is worth the struggle. But for you, if you have sacral authority, and really if you're an MG or generator at all, it comes down to choosing what feels good in every moment. It's just that people who have sacral authority don't have that emotional authority that's kind of asking them to be a little more patient. They get to operate a little bit more in the moment, a little bit more spontaneously if you have that sacral authority. Now, another thing to realize if you have sacral authority is that the things you choose that don't feel good are kind of clogging up your energetic pool. And so if you are choosing things out of obligation, out of an idea of how you should be, the universe is sensing, okay, well, it sounds like she already has her plate full right now, so I'm not going to send her more opportunities to react to, or send her maybe the dream client because she's already operating with this client that's just kind of okay and not lighting her up. And so for you, if you have sacral authority, it's really interesting to play with not only saying the yeses that feel good, but really, really embodying the no's where things just don't feel good in your system. And you don't want to take that on, and kind of sit with the discomfort in that. Life is really asking for you to be discerning in that way.
Okay. And then what about if someone's, listening to this description and they're like, well, if I'm doing everything that makes me feel good, it's quitting my job, or it's maybe taking things too far and being very hedonistic. What would you say about that?
Well, I think hedonism is a little bit underrated. I really do believe that more of us should be operating from this place of what feels good. And now I'm not asking you to blow up your whole life right now because, it didn't feel good to sweep your kitchen this morning. I'm really talking about those things that feel good to you and on a soul expansive level, and the things that don't feel good to you on a level that feels kind of soul crushing. And so I would really ask that you just take a step back and start by asking yourself the simple questions of what feels good in your body. Is that a yes or is that a no? Kind of listening for that gut response coming from that sacral about little things like what you want to eat for breakfast. And really build trust with yourself on those little things. And then you'll notice that you're kind of gaining this momentum to make the bigger decisions that are a little harder, and to start filling your life with the things that really just bring you joy.
Very good examples. And what's the population like? Is it like 30%? I know that you said emotional authority is 50. So what is sacral authority like?
So I actually don't have percentages on the rest of the authorities, but intuitively, I would say it probably is about 30%.
Okay, good to know. And I just like with the emotional authority, there's really good learnings for everyone for the sacral authority as well.
Oh, 100%. Right. Again, you can't, and this is something I like about the authorities too. You can't really go wrong. Even if you have no idea what your authority is, you can't really go wrong if you're just going to adopt this practice of really being in integrity and making a decision and doing it in a way that either feels good, is intuitive, is more patient, is collaborative. So really take what you need from all of these examples.
And I think something that, confuses me from time to time is, I myself have a splenic authority, but listening to you talk about emotional and sacral, I'm like, oh, like these could also be mine as well. So it's kind of like, but I am splenic, but I also identify with other things. And for me, it causes a bit of like confusion.
I'm glad you brought that up. Well, the first thing that could be going on is that sometimes when you have these centers defined, you'll be able to kind of relate to the energies coming from them. Now, what authority is telling you is that this is your ultimate decision maker. So these other elements might be going on in your body and are themes of humanity, but you want to really come back to just this one thing as your decision maker. For example, and we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but I think this is kind of the perfect transition into splenic authority. A generator or a manifesting generator would never have splenic authority, which is tied very deeply to intuition, and we'll talk about that. Now, that doesn't mean that a generator or manifesting generator should never tap into their intuition. Quite the opposite. Your intuition is there to help you out at all times. What it really means, though, is that if your intuition is telling you something and that doesn't feel good in your body, say you have sacral authority, it's not really going to work out as well for you. So it's kind of this little thing in your system that overrides everything else and that you just need to trust as your ultimate decision maker.
Okay, thank you. That was such a valuable clarification.
Thank you. Yes, this is, and I like that we're going deep here because these are concepts that I don't speak about often and that are really kind of next level for your human design journey. So I'm excited for those people that are willing to really take this information and start putting it into play in their daily lives.
Yes. Oh, okay. So now we are going to talk about splenic authority, right?
Yes, the authority that both you and I have, which is very funny because splenic authority, we're going kind of from most common authority to least common authority here as we snake our way through the human design chart. And so splenic authority is at its core, it's intuition. It's an instant voice that is telling you to do something in the moment that you can't always make sense of. And I think that is really that last piece of the sentence, can't always make sense of, is really, really what defines splenic authority. So I really find that splenic authority is the most challenging authority to work with. And I'm not just saying that because I have it. It's something that we've really been conditioned out of. And we talked about conditioning with the first two authorities as well, but how many of us are walking around on a day-to-day basis and saying, you know what? I am literally only going to do things that my intuition tells me to do. Probably not that many of us. We've been taught that that's not necessarily the safe, quote unquote, way to make a decision. And for some of us, and you would be either a projector or a manifester if you had splenic authority. Our intuition is just pure gold. And it's really how we need to be tapping into living our life. So if you have splenic authority, start to elevate your intuition to a level that maybe you haven't been comfortable with previously. Start to take notes on what your intuition is telling you and how that feels. So I mentioned that it's a voice that tells you something, and that's my experience, but it could also feel like a knowing or a feeling in your body or maybe you smell or taste something. That can happen to people too. Whatever it is, it's just your knowing, and it's kind of a message coming through that doesn't always make sense. And so just start to write what those are down. Start to write the messages down and don't judge them. And I will say, you don't even have to start by following them. Just start by noticing them and taking note of them, and then noticing the outcome. So, did you follow your intuition and it led you to this amazing partnership opportunity? Did you ignore your intuition and someone actually ended up sending you a nasty email about something you did? Just noticing where that plays out and what happens can really, really help you start to trust your intuition more. So again, we're doing some trust building exercises here. And then this is the scary part. Once you feel comfortable trusting it, just kind of jumping off the cliff in some moments. Like when your intuition is telling you something crazy and you cannot explain it, really digging deep and saying, okay, like I'm trusting myself here, and I know that there is a higher power knowing coming through me right now. And that's the decision I'm going to make. And so your intuition, the biggest defining factor of it is that it won't always make sense. It will speak to you in moments that aren't necessarily the most convenient. And it's rooted in clarity. So a lot of times we get our intuition confused with fear. And so you want to make sure that that fear voice isn't speaking to you. It's more of this clear, embodied, intuitive voice. Now, that's not to say that your intuition can't sometimes tell you things that might cause you to be fearful. Like one of my biggest moments of intuition was hearing, "You're not safe here." And it was true. And it was something I needed to listen to. But it was very calm in its delivery of that information. It's not your fear mind that's going to keep cycling and saying, "You're not safe here, and this is the reason why, and this is what you need to do, and think about not being safe here." It's just very clear and calm and comes to you in the moment.
Yes, and we'll elaborate a little bit more about intuition and the authorities later in this conversation. But yes, every single person is going to have a different way that their intuition communicates with them. And if you have the splenic authority, you're just lucky that it kind of matches up, your intuition and the spleen. But honestly, I think the example you had about fear is great, because fear will feel different, like you said. It might be a little noisier, it might be a little bit quick, but your intuition is always going to be a little bit calm, a little bit more steady. Only you will know what it feels, what it sounds, if you're hearing it. And so it's important to really practice it. And you can practice it with small things, what you want to eat, what type of workout you want to do that day, that week, to big decisions like making a big move, taking a different job, a significant other, those types of things.
100% right. It's something that everyone has. It's just that it's not something that has to be the ultimate decision maker for every single person.
I could talk about the splenic authority forever because it's mine, but we have others. We have others to speak about.
Yes. So moving on up through the body graph, the next one is, and this is one where there is a lot of conditioning. The next authority is egoic authority. And so in human design, the ego is very connected to the heart center. So it's not the ego that we talk about in psychology, where it's kind of outside of you and trying to make you appear bigger than you really feel. It's not something we need to be at odds with, at least through the human design lens. It's something we need to make peace with and accept that if you have a defined ego center, which is uncommon. Only about 20% of people have a defined ego center in the first place. And even then, it doesn't mean that that's your authority. But if you have egoic authority, your decisions should be made in feeling like, is this something you want? And it's going to feel a little bit selfish, maybe, to say, what? I can't make decisions based on only what I want. But you can. So start to give yourself permission to go after what your heart wants. Call in the things that your heart wants. Live in this heart-centered desire sort of state, and start to call in things that make you feel like you're in your power. Start to choose things that make you feel like you're in your power. And now, where we get into trouble with egoic authority is when we look outside of ourselves and say, what's going to make me look powerful? But it's about what's going to make you feel powerful, what's going to make you feel good, what's going to satisfy the desires that you have as a being on this earthly plane. Because you were put here to have desires that make an impact or make you money or affect your community, or maybe you want to be famous, you want to be seen. There's something in the ego for you that's actually totally life-giving and life-affirming, rather than something that you need to push down and be ashamed of.
Such good advice.
So moving up the chain to G-center authority, only projectors can have G-center authority, and your G-center is kind of that diamond shape in the middle of your chart, a square diamond. And if you have G-center authority, this one's a little bit easier to work with. It's a little bit more mechanical. Clarity comes when you share your thoughts with others, and then it becomes clear to you. So it's all about the quality of your voice and you just showing up and not being afraid to express the version of yourself that you really are. And the sharing is not because you don't know. You completely know. It's that you need to hear yourself speak. You need to hear something about the quality of your voice will be really resonant with you. And so you're seeking out a really trusted counsel of friends that you can call on, family, where you know that they can just hold space for you to talk something out, and that they're not going to give you tons of advice or try to get you to do something a certain way. Because again, this is not about you seeking outside advice. It's about you truly just talking something out to hear yourself work it out in the moment. Now, you can also, sometimes people ask me if they have G-center authority, well, can I just journal? And yes, journaling is helpful because, as I said, it's a process of really working things out. But there is something to be said about that vocal expression for you. It's really, really important that you vocalize what you're working through. And so even pulling up like the notes app on your phone and using the microphone to record yourself talking as you walk around your apartment can be really, really helpful. But it's in the expression and it's in the voice for you. So whenever you have a big decision, just make sure you vocally express in some way what you're thinking about it and what you want your next steps to be, any hangups you have, anything you're excited about. Just make sure that you really talk it out.
I feel like it's a good opportunity to talk to a therapist.
Ooh, I love that. Wow. G-center authority with a therapist seems incredibly powerful.
Because it's as someone who loves to give advice, typical projector, I ask now, I'm like, do you want advice or do you just need a sounding board? And I think that learning about this authority is quite helpful because, in the past, I've thought like, oh, like this person is just like dumping all this stuff on me. I want to be able to engage, but what they need from you is to just listen. And that is enough. And isn't that great? You can just like sit there and listen. You don't have to do anything. But as a projector, you always feel so, you just feel like you need to share your advice, annoyingly so at times.
Yes. So if your trusted counsel includes projectors, make sure they are projectors that listen.
Yes. Yes. This is very important. But no, there is so much that you can learn by just hearing yourself speak, because it's almost like you speak it into truth and understanding.
Yes. Yes. There's a lot of truth speaking here going on with this one. And so that kind of leads us into the next authority, which is mental authority. And it has some commonalities with that G center authority, because if you have mental authority, and again, this could only be a projector, it's also going to be really, really helpful for you to talk things out. You're going to be someone who is just razor sharp, and there's a real need for you to share your opinions and judgments on the world. But because you'll be likely even more sensitive than that G center authority person, you also need to make sure that you're in a really correct environment for you to make a good decision. You are all about observing the world around you to find clues about the right thing to do. So the environment that you're in while you're doing that is really, really important to making those big decisions. And for you, it's all about making that space and trusting yourself that once you share what you share, the shoulds don't need to get in the way of that. And you can just be confident in your genius of what you're thinking about the world and what you're sharing, and that your decision making is kind of this extension of you and your very brilliant mind.
Okay. And let's talk a little bit more about environment. A lot of times when people think about environment, they only think about physical space, but there's so much more. There's, energetically who you surround yourself with, how you take care of yourself. So let's say someone has mental authority, but they're not quite in the ideal living situation, where it's still COVID, it's still a pandemic. So what advice do you have for them in cultivating a sacred space, an environment that will allow them to make the right decisions?
That's a great question. And I think it goes back to that council of people that you need to have around you. So again, very, very important for mental authority folks to have people they can trust to just really act as sounding boards to them. And I would encourage you to start looking online for those people, start building a community of people that you trust, that are really sensitive, that are tuned into how you like to operate if you're not finding that in your own home. I would also encourage you, if you are lucky enough and have the privilege of being able to get out and spend some time in nature, that can be really, really helpful for these folks to clear out and, even be that crazy person that's talking to themselves as you're walking through the woods. You would get a lot out of that scenario, just placing yourself in that really supportive environment.
It's always a good time in nature. No matter if you're feeling good, if you're feeling down, it's just such a big reset button to be outside.
Yes. And if you do have mental authority, your chart is going to be very, very open. And anyone can have an open chart. That's just about how many defined or undefined centers you have. So if you're seeing a lot of whiteness in your chart, that means there's a lot of openness. Anyone that has a lot of openness, really, really important that you take time to empty out in nature.
Yes. So we've covered all of the authorities, correct?
We have one more, but this one's very, very specific, and it's only for reflectors. So reflectors have technically no inner authority, and their authority really comes from the moon cycle. So allowing the world to give you the answer in the next 28 days. if you're a reflector, you will go through a little mini cycle in your life about every 28 days, and you will almost become different versions of the person that you are. So, this is one where cultivating patience is even more key. Really, really important to be able to sit on things and give yourself that permission with the really big decisions. Now, because this is 2020 and we live in real life, I also like to recommend that reflectors try a little bit of the sounding board type of authority advice as well, and kind of cultivate a council that can help them work through those decisions a little bit more quickly. Some people who know you really well, and again, people who aren't going to force any sort of projections on you. Asking them if you really feel that you need to make a decision more quickly than your cycle will allow, but also recognizing that patience is going to be a total virtue for you as well.
So would this authority be called a moon authority?
Yeah, so it's technically no inner authority, but lunar authority can also be, you might also see that somewhere.
Ah, okay. And, with these 28 days, what happens during this time? Do you just need the space? Let's say if you do need that full time to make a decision, like, because I know the moon phases change like every few days, are you going to be feeling different things every few days? Like, what is that going to feel like for a person with a lunar authority?
Right. So reflectors are really, really tapped into kind of the divine and spirit. They have the most kind of thinly veiled existence between the divine and between our world. And that is key if they allow themselves to feel that, because a lot of reflectors were not raised to operate as these more sensitive, tapped in beings that they really are. And so, if you're a reflector, as you're kind of bouncing through the world, you are meeting up with people that kind of, you almost end up assuming their identity and their personality and acting as a mirror back to them. And the moon is kind of causing that effect in you as well. So when you have this many different kind of aspects of personality that you need to shift through in the month, it's just correct for you to make sure that your true alignment, that all of those aspects of personality are really lining up with what you want, and not just one of them is taking over.
Okay, got it. Would you say that someone with a lunar authority is potentially more psychic?
So I find that reflectors are really, really tapped in and can find insights in a way that others can't. But psychicness will often come through in the chart in the spleen. If you have gate 57, that's a good indicator that you have some psychic abilities. And then I also find that it'll come through in the crown.
Okay. So it's actually such a perfect segue into talking about intuition and the spleen and what human design has has taught us about the spleen and how it relates to intuition. Because we talk about the authorities helping with intuitive decision making, but it's also very different from intuition.
Right. Intuitive decision making, kind of divorcing that from intuition. And so I was telling you earlier that when I learned about human design, I learned that if you don't have a defined spleen, then you're really not intuitive. And that number really sat well with me. And then once I started reading for clients and meeting people, especially once I became a healer and started meeting people through that way, I noticed, okay, there are all of these people I know that are incredibly, incredibly tapped in, incredibly intuitive, and yet they have undefined spleen centers. And so that can't be right. And I really realized that intuition can come through in the chart in a number of places. So, of course, first is the spleen. And even if, as I said before, even if you don't have splenic authority, you may very well have a defined spleen and have that kind of little voice or whatever it is speaking to you. It's just not your ultimate decision maker, but it is something that you can keep note of. And then I also noticed that it'll come through for many people who have an undefined spleen, it will come through the crown center. So if you have your head/crown center, that's the very tippy top of your chart, connected with your ajna third eye center, I find that a lot of those people, especially if there's a lot of openness in their chart, will experience an intuition that speaks more in the form of downloads and knowings and these like divine messages that are coming through, rather than maybe more of that instinct driven intuition that's coming through in the spleen. And those are really the two places where I see intuition coming through quite strongly. However, there are a number of places in the chart where you could be very intuitive or especially very empathetic. If you have an open solar plexus, it's likely that you're feeling into people's emotions and gaining some sort of intuitive information that way. Often empaths are very, very intuitive. And so it's good to just keep an open mind when you're listening to all of this human design information, because for you, your intuition may come through really, really differently just than the textbook way that maybe human design is telling you it does.
Mm-hmm. So the authority helps us to make decisions that are right for ourselves based on our human design chart. And intuition is something that is always available to us, and to really just identify what that sounds, looks, because there's various different types of intuition. I like to say that sometimes it's kind of like it starts off very small, like a voice or a feeling, but then as you really work on developing your intuition, it will funnel into one of the clairs. And there's 5 main ones that relate and correlate to your senses. So there's taste, smell, seeing, hearing, physical feeling, taste. Like these main ones, and you may have one, you may have a couple, but it takes some time if it isn't very clear to you straight off the bat.
Right. And how many of us, again, coming back to that, how many of us were actually encouraged to develop our intuition and to trust the things that were coming through that we couldn't make sense of, from a book or something like that. So this is really a journey, and there's no time that's too late to tap into your intuition. It's really available for you at all times, and it can only get stronger. It's not like you can, do anything to damage it.
Mm-hmm. And then what advice do you have for people wanting to develop their intuition and also honor their authority at the same time? Like, how do they work together?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, for anyone who wants to develop their intuition, not just people with a defined spleen, I really do recommend that note taking exercise. And it doesn't have to be like a whole ceremonial thing that you do. It can just be, I honestly, and I've stopped doing this because I feel pretty in tune with myself now, but a few years ago, I just kept a list in my phone. And it could be things as little as one time I had a glass of water on the counter, and my little inner voice said, "You're going to knock that glass of water over when you walk by it." And I said, "That's stupid. Now I know I'm really not going to knock that glass of water over." And then of course, like my blanket knocked it over as I was walking from the couch to the kitchen. So even little things like that, where you think it's something so silly, but it's just a moment where you knew something that you couldn't have possibly known, and you have to reward yourself for that. That's something that can really end up affecting your life in a much greater way than just stopping you from knocking over a glass. And then for people with emotional authorities, or say you're a generator, so you have that defined sacral and you have the emotional authority on top of it, the spleen will still, or I should say your intuition will still speak to you in the moment. You shouldn't necessarily make a decision based on what it says immediately, but just write it down and then come back to that once you're in that place of being cool, calm, and collected. And then compare that against that sacral gut feeling that you have. And if they're all aligned, then that's a very strong decision for you.
Yeah, I asked just because for me, because I have a splenic authority, which is, in line with intuition, I don't know what it's like to have emotional or sacral, which can run parallel to intuition.
Right. And so just coming back to the idea that your intuition is there to help you, but it doesn't have to. If it's making you feel like it's pulling you in a million directions, it doesn't have to be the thing that is ultimately what serves you. It's going to serve you better to take that time and to really, really make sure things feel good in your body, if that's the case.
Mm-hmm. And so, do you have any other examples that you really like to share from readings you've done with clients or your own experiences?
Yeah. So I find that when people start living with emotional authority, they start feeling a lot calmer, and and they start making decisions that feel better for them long term. So I read for someone who said, I love the reading, but what I really took away from it, and this was last year, what I really took away from it was that I have to be patient to make decisions. And she said, like, that was a game changer for me. Like, that changed everything. Like, I have so many less regrets now when I come back to the decisions I've made. I'm able to tell people that they're going to have to wait a little bit longer for me to make a decision, and do that from a place of confidence rather than a place of fear. And she just found that it was a lot easier to be aligned long term when she was giving herself that space. So for the 50% of people with emotional authority, I would really, really encourage you to take that example and to just try it. I know it's going to feel a little strange, but really, really starting to be patient in that way.
Okay, yes. And then someone with sacral, I know that's the second biggest one.
Yeah. So people with sacral authority, I think that when you find that you're really living in sacral authority, it's almost like this inner comfort that comes through for you. People aren't you'll become very like sparkly and warm and magnetic, and like people won't necessarily be able to put their finger on it. So I often find that one's one that just affects people more on an internal level, and they just end up feeling good in the moment because they're choosing the thing that feels good. So of course, that's going to have an overall effect, and you're going to start really just emanating those juicy choices that you're making.
And now it's a fun time for us to kind of compare how splenic authority manifests within ourselves, as we both have this authority. I know for me, you're completely right. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. I'll have a thought and I'm like, no, but I want this situation. Like, actually, an interesting example to share was when I was dating someone. I remember it was a very stressful time at work, and we were also getting into a lot of fights. And it was a very loud voice in my head that just kept on saying, I don't have time for this. Like, I don't have the energy to do this. And at that point, I was still very much so early on in understanding my human design and also developing my intuition. I was like, okay, this is just me giving up. No, relationships aren't always easy. And this is just an opportunity for me to kind of, just move through it. And yes, life's going to get kind of crazy personally and professionally, but this will just pass. I chalked it up to being really busy at work and that kind of affecting my personal life, my relationship, but I'm not with that person anymore.
You always know, right? And we're able to, once we honor our splenic authority, we're able to come back to situations and say, oh man, I would have saved myself a lot of time if I would have just listened in the moment. For me personally, I find that as I honor it more, my splenic authority gets stronger and stronger, but it also asks me to make scarier and scarier decisions. And I
Oh
think
my God. Yes. I've been feeling that lately and it's very uncomfortable.
it is. My biggest test to date was back in the last week of July. And it was actually August was my first month going full time as a healer and a reader, and it was very exciting. And then I got this little voice. It felt like a message from spirit come through the last week of July that said, "You can't do human design readings in August. I don't want you to do human design readings in August." And I said, "What? No, this is my life's work is now built on this. That's my income." But it felt so loud and clear. And I said, okay, this is time to put your money where your mouth is. Like, this is your work and you need to listen to this voice. And so I blocked my calendar off for August. I didn't tell anyone. And it was such an expansive time for me. I really, really stepped into my role as a healer in that month. And then when I came back in September, I, of course, had my biggest month ever. And things were so effortless. Like, opportunities were just flying my way. And if you have splenic authority, like, really, really lean into, and if you have the privilege to be able to do this too, because I understand that I was definitely able to make that choice from a place of privilege. Really lean into the discomfort and the craziness, because there is so much magic waiting for you on the other side of that.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't make sense, but only after it's said and done, you're like, okay, I understand why I needed some time to myself or why I quit a perfectly great job.
Mm-hmm. Trust yourself.
I want to share our most recent example. So, Graciela and I, it was just last week, I had an idea for us to partner up on a program. So I reached out to her, we chatted about it, and both of our authorities, our intuition really came into play. I'll share mine, Graciela, and I'll let you share what happened for you. Does that sound
Yes.
good?
Great. Yes.
So I had an idea come to me about doing a month-long program about Saturn return. And I know that with my Saturn return a few years ago, human design, astrology, other things really helped me. And so I wanted to incorporate all of that into this program/course. And Graciela and I have really gotten to know each other, these past 6 months. And I was like, you know what? She'd be a great person to partner with. And I reached out to her. We kind of had some back and forth. And when we were speaking, I kind of felt, I was like, you know what? I wanted to do this with her, but I don't think this is right for us at that point in time. And maybe even 6 months ago or last year, I could have really ignored my intuition that was kind of telling me, this is not the right opportunity. This is not the right time. But because for us, we're always doing the work as we teach and share ourselves, it's even more accountability for us to take a step back and practice what we preach. And so, I was like, yeah, I don't think this is the right opportunity, even though I really wanted to. And so what was it like for you on your side?
I love that because it was that ultimate example of practicing what we preach. Because I too would have, even 6 months ago, a year ago, I love you so much. I love your work so much. And I was so excited that you asked me to partner on a program. And programs are something that I have been meaning to expand into for some time. And especially as a projector, being invited into this was very exciting. However, I have an affiliate launch coming up that conflicts with the timing of the program that we were doing. And my body was just like, oh no, like this, I don't think this is the right one. Don't overburden yourself. Like, don't stress yourself out like that. Again, projector, only take on as much as you can handle. And so I felt really embodied in getting back to you and saying, you know what, like I value this so much. I know we'll work together in the future, but this one is not right for me. And that would have been such a scary decision for me to make a little while ago. But because I really trusted my intuition in that, and because I trusted that you were doing the work in this too, and you would fully understand where I was coming from, it was a much easier email to send.
Yes. And I felt it. I was like, I do really want to work with Graciela on this, but maybe it's not going to be this one, because the minute we started talking about schedules and whatnot, it just felt like it was like such a feeling, and I could have easily ignored it.
Right. And I think just to kind of close this out and bring everything back to authority, your authority is never punishing you. Sometimes it might feel like that. Sometimes it might feel like something scary comes through, or you are nervous to kind of take on working intuitively with your decision making in this way. But these decision-making capabilities are always here to serve your highest good. And so I have no doubt that we will do a program together one day. And neither of us are being punished by the current situation. This is only serving our highest good and just really kicking us both back into alignment.
Yeah, it was really nice. There was no real conflict. There was no real resentment. It was just a perfect unfolding of something that will work out later, not now, but later. And it's just kind of like having someone to bounce ideas off of, and not being attached to the outcome.
Okay. Now that not being attached to the outcome, that is something for everyone to take note of.
Yeah. And so I think that was such a wonderful way of explaining how different authorities show up for people, and as well as for ourselves, and what it feels like to really put this into work, and what doing the work means. It's not easy. And sometimes it's easy to pass through these things. You may not realize it's an opportunity to practice your authority, to operate out of your authority or your intuition, but it always is. And it's just to be mindful, to take a step back and say, is this for my highest good? Is this operating in a way that serves me?
Yes, 100%. Always, always looking to that highest good and trusting that things will work out in your favor.
Mm-hmm. And, with all my interviews / conversations, I like to close out with, rituals and a quote. And I know you've shared your rituals and quote before, but is there anything that you've added in the last few months to your morning or evening routine that you've just really enjoyed?
Oh, one cool thing I've been doing, and this is totally unrelated to authorities at all, but it's HAR meditation for prosperity.
Me too.
Oh, of course. This is hilarious because I feel like we're both becoming very magnetic right now. It's almost like this meditation should come with a warning before people do it, because I swear to you, in the first week of doing this, I had 5 media opportunities come through, and I completely sold out an event I was heading up like effortlessly. And it was just like, okay, universe, I see you. So that's something that I've been really getting into and having a lot of fun with.
I love that. It's a fun meditation. And do you have a quote or a mantra that you've been focusing on the last few months since we last spoke?
I do. And this one it's really funny. It's not spiritual at all, but the message that was really coming through for me in October, and I think is still holding strong in November, is keep your eyes on your own paper. That there is some spiritual noise out there, y'all. So just take what resonates and leave the rest and do what you need to do to keep moving forward and feel really good in your own integrity rather than worrying about what everyone else is doing.
Understanding your authority is really how you will integrate human design into your everyday life, allowing it to guide you in small decisions and big decisions to bring in more flow and ease. Did we answer your questions about your authority? Did we provide good examples? If you have more questions, please reach out to us on Instagram. Maybe Graciela and I will also team up for a workshop in the future. So like I mentioned at the end of the episode, I'll be introducing a Saturn return program in a couple months, and I can't wait to share it with you. Your Saturn return happens in your late 20s and really is the universe telling you and guiding you, are you on the right path? Are you fulfilling your soul's purpose? And during this time, it can get a little bit hectic, a little bit stressful, big changes happening to your professional life, maybe some existential questions about if you're in the right role, if you're in the right career path will come up for you. Maybe you want to make a big move across the country or across the world. And this program, this course, is really going to give you the tools and insights you need to navigate your Saturn return gracefully.